A little bit about the Spanish conspiracy. So, as every Kentuckian knows, because Kentuckians, they know a lot. They are some of the most smartest, brightest people out here. Kentuckians know their civics, they know their laws, they know how to interact with each other. They're good with their democratic practices, with brushing their teeth, with bathing, with wearing shoes, with being able to read. Ignore those statistics that says we're number one for toothlessness and cancer and pollution. That's that's just a bunch of Ivy League carpetbagger Yankees, right? This is scallywag country, and if you come down to the South, you a scallywag. If reconstruction, we're going to reconstruct your ass is what we're going to do. So scallywag. As a scallywag, we know the Spanish conspiracy. We understand that James Wilkinson, James Wilkinson is one of the main people for the beginning of Kentucky history. James Wilkinson owned the land that Frankfort sits on today. James Wilkinson owned that land that Frankfort sits on. There was a guy named Frank, I'm going to say James Frank, it might be a different first name, Mr. Frank. He got shot by some Indians. He fell into the river, the Kentucky River, and they said that was Frank's Ford. That's where Frank had forded over the river, if you're familiar with the Oregon Trail. So Frank's Ford, Frankfurt. Because of James Wilkinson, Frankfurt got its name. Frankfort, the capital of Kentucky today, got its name because of James Wilkinson. So who is this James Wilkinson, right? Since we know so much about James Wilkinson, he was the author or the initiator of the Spanish conspiracy. Now, there's a big part of this that I'm going to mention at the very end, but until we get to that part, because they didn't know it at the time, So James Wilkinson is with the pioneers in the 1780s, 1770s. You only had about 200 settlers, all right? When Daniel Boone and, all the rest of them started coming up here, you didn't have very many people just flocking into Kentucky for, dark and bloody reasons. Now, here is just a quick thing from Wikipedia. Leading up to Kentucky's 7th Convention regarding separation from Virginia in November 1788, Wilkinson attempted to gauge the support for Kentucky to seek union with Spain. Wilkinson was not a highly honorable man, but his ability to win people over with his charm and sincerity got him elected committee chairman at the convention. He's the chairman, right? The 7th Convention. It took 10 state conventions before Kentucky became a state. It took 10 conventions. There was a court party, which was actually represented the poor people, and then there was the land party, the ownership class, the people that had all those Virginia land claims. The court party, the intellectual, smart, poor people, was able to get the reins of power and try to form Kentucky as a poor man's country, as like a Daniel Boone country and not a Henry Clay type of country. So, this was up into the 7th Convention, Now, this is important. For many, joining the Union was conditional upon the Union negotiating with Spain to arrange free navigation on the Mississippi River. That's the reason that, when Kentuckians today want to say, well, love it or leave it, you better speak English, right, yeah. Nobody from Great Britain can understand what the hell a hillbilly's even talking about. It's like, that, would you like to spot? Hey, is that English? That is not English. What, Sam? Hell, he talk right chair? I had the tomato, I had the taters right there, right chair. I had the taters, right chair. Right chair, I had a tater. You saying chair? What do you, I don't, okay. You get my point. We're speaking English, but there's different dialects, right? So the fact that, English, the language of English comes from England, Anglo-Saxons, which actually were the Germans, invaded England. Anglo-Saxons are German armies. They had gone into England, pushed out everybody in England, and then they became the dominant, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the WASP. The WASP are the people who colonized America. So the fact that we speak English was really just by happenstance. First, it was because, America was English and then the internet. So it was just luck of the draw, just because we happened to be in the right, place at the right time. So but we could have been speaking French. We could have been speaking Spanish. We were this close for speaking Spanish. In fact, it wasn't just the 7th convention. It took 10 conventions before it become a state. But on the 7th convention, he was sitting there pushing for us to join up with the Spanish Empire. When the United States, what we today call the United States, was being colonized, you had the French that was here. Actually, the first white person to set foot in Kentucky was Hernando de Soto, a Spanish man. And then you had the French, and then you had the English. So, the French and the Spanish actually got to Kentucky before, any of the English did. And that was actually, there's some argument that says Welsh were here. But that's, if you ignore all the Algonquin, Chickasaw, and Yuchi-speaking peoples, which is important. We shouldn't forget anybody. But that's, we're this close from actually speaking Spanish. So when people want to say, I hate to push 1 for English, push 2 for Spanish, that's not a real problem. That's white people, racist, fucking bullshit problems. You got to fucking wait 2 seconds? It makes me think of a joke. Okay, so, what do you call a person who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Multilingual. What do you call somebody who speaks 1 language? An American. Because you're fucking stupid. You only know 1 fucking language. And, I think it's more culturally, you only actually do think in 1 language. And yes, there is a dream that we all could speak 1 language one day. But who decides which language do we speak? Of course you want to speak your own language. That's what the Germans would want. That's what the Russians and the Chinese, that's what they would want too. I think it's good to be smart, so it's good if I know somebody that's bilingual, knows 2 languages, that's a smart person, okay? That's a person that can talk to a whole other nation of people that I could never talk to without some sort of translator or Google Translate. Okay, so the Spanish conspiracy. There was the 4th convention, then Patrick Henry sends, a bunch of Kentuckians to go fight, and so, they're still trying to get the statehood, and they're having to decide, do they want to become part of the United States? The 13, 14 colonies, Vermont jumped in, were the 15th state, 1792. June 1st is when Kentucky became a state. That's, we were, the 15th person to be, or the 15th state to join the United States, but that was the options. We were a county of Virginia, so you had all these pioneers, and there was, the French had a claim on the Mississippi River all the way up to New Orleans. New Orleans was Spanish, the Spanish capital of Louisiana. Spain and France kept on switching Louisiana over. De La Salle, Sierra, Robert de La Salle. So Monsieur or Robert de La Salle actually came down the Mississippi River, claimed all that for France. And so, France had the strongest claim for Kentucky in the very beginning. Hernando de Soto walked through there, killed a bunch of Native Americans, spread his diseases, to everybody, but he didn't, claim that he died. He wound up being buried in the Mississippi River. So it was the French. The French were the first people that took a step in Boone County. So that's the first, white people at least. And they had a claim of the land. So we could have been speaking French. The reason why I say that is because when you have all these colonists, they were frustrated with the American government. They had fought in the Revolution, so they felt like they had done their revolutionary, their American duty, but they weren't getting any of the love from the 13 colonies. You had the Appalachian Mountains, people in the East Coast are probably like, fuck them Kentuckians, fuck them pioneers over there. And so there was Transylvania Purchase. They tried to separate and made their own country. That scared Virginia enough to where they created their own county, and so Kentucky began as the county of Virginia. But some people complained about that too, because why should this, government all the way in Richmond sit there and dictate who owns what land here in this state, in our bluegrass? And so the biggest point of contention was, it was hard to get through the mountains. The biggest navigation, the biggest way we could trade was with the Ohio River. The Ohio River just all the way at the very top of Kentucky, all the way, right? So, you do whatever, you go ahead and cut a bunch of trees, you raise tobacco, you raise some beef cattle. Excuse me. and then you put them on the Ohio River, goes down to Mississippi, goes to New Orleans. Now you got international trade. Now you have people buying and trading, and that's good for the economy. So a lot of people that was in Kentucky wanted control of the Mississippi River, but because Spain controlled the Mississippi River, they were not permitting anybody to come and go without having to pay tariffs and taxes and fees. So they wanted unrestricted access. Well, that's what they demanded. That's what the Kentuckians wanted, but the United States government didn't give a shit about that. They didn't give a fuck. So what happened was you have James Wilkinson who, exploited this discontent. He goes down to the Spanish government, says, I'm going to try to get the Kentuckians to become a colony of Spain. And then the 5th Statehood Convention for the District of Kentucky assembled in Danville September 17th. By this time, distinct factions had formed within the district's political leadership. The court faction desired immediate separation from Virginia and an agreement with Spain that would allow Kentucky use of the Mississippi River. So there was a faction of people that wanted this. There was a faction of Kentuckians that wanted to become a colony of the Spanish Empire. They didn't want to become Americans. They didn't want to be part of the United States. They didn't want to be part of this federal government. They didn't want to become, the French Empire. They didn't want independence. That was another thing they could have done, is just said, we are our own nation. We are Kentuckians. They didn't want any of that. Instead, they said we wanted to be a colony of the Spanish Empire. The other faction was the country faction, the land faction, made up of wealthy landowners whose interest was in remaining a part of Virginia to maintain their land grants. That protected their large estates. Breckinridge County, the founder of Breckinridge County, got a 94,000 acre tract of land. 94,000. So if you were, Native Americans or, poor white people who had been in Breckinridge County living on this 94,000 acres that somebody in Virginia had said that it was this guy's, but you've been living there for the last 10 years, and then this guy says, hey, this is my land, you got to go. Well, I've been living here for 10 years. I got a house, I got corn, I got kids, what do you mean I got to go? That happened to Abraham Lincoln. That happened to Daniel Boone. Neither Abraham Lincoln's father nor Daniel Boone could hold on and keep the lands that they had in Kentucky because of the Henry Clay type of aristocrats, the courts, the prosecutors, the Commonwealth's attorneys. These motherfuckers only give a shit about the wealthy, the rich. If you ain't got no money, then fuck you, get the hell out of our state, or be cheap labor so we can exploit you. So, which is basically the same as today. So that's what we got. Only Wilkinson was still in New Orleans. There was a vote. They voted unanimously. The convention eventually voted to accept Virginia's terms of separation, with 2 country faction members abstaining. So they separated from Virginia. That's what the 5th convention, the conspiracy grows. The Wilkinson took a circuitous route home from New Orleans that included stops in Charleston, West Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He finally returned to Kentucky on February 24th, 1788. Once there, he began to share the details of his exploits with some of his trusted colleagues. He apparently determined how much he confided in a particular individual by his estimation of how willing the individual would be to participate in some sort of arrangement with the Spanish. Because of this, his contemporaries and historians who studied these events were unable to determine his exact goals. To some, it seemed he genuinely desired Kentucky's separation from the United States and absorption by the Spanish Empire. To others, it appeared he had made empty promises to Spain in order to secure favorable economic concessions for himself. So, we eventually the end thing is that he was a spy. He was a spy. So the founder of Frankfurt, the person who owns the land that Frankfurt sits on today, the man who went through, half of the state conventions, who was pushing for the Kentuckians, and the Kentuckians, half the Kentuckians, wanted to do that. They separated from Virginia. The next step would have been to join the Spanish Empire in order to get the Mississippi waters, in order to get trade on the Mississippi River. The Ohio River dumps into the Mississippi River. The people, and plus I think fighting Native Americans too. So the East Coast, the 13 colonies didn't give a shit about Kentuckians. So we were this close from being a part of the Spanish Empire. Had we been a part of the Spanish Empire or the French Empire, then we'd been speaking French or Spanish language, or we could have been speaking a Kentucky language if we just said, hey, we're going to be our own people. But we didn't do any of that. Of course, as every Kentuckian knows, June 1st, 1792, we became the 15th state to join the Union. So, you know, we would never have to learn Donde está la Miliza en. Where the weed at? Donde está la Miliza en. Or Bastardo, Bese mi culo puto, hijo de puta, pinche idiota, tu madre es una puta fia, your mother's an ugly bitch. So we never had to learn any of these, you know, fun phrases. Chinga tu madre, vale madre, está pero si bien, pendejo, pinche stupido, fucking idiot. Pinche, I think it's pinche, un puter de ente, un puter de ente. It's a lot of fucking people. No mames, puto, puta. It's a faggot and a whore. So we never had to learn Spanish. I think it's good to learn more languages. We, you know, shouldn't be so myopic in our worldview. And, you know, no hablo español, amigo. Even that. You know, no hablo español, amigo. I don't speak Spanish. So, Kentucky, you want to talk about, you know, push 1 for English, 2 for Spanish? You're that close from speaking Spanish, so you've been bitching about the exact opposite. Oh, you know, why we gotta speak? That's my English, you know, Spanish. Why we gotta push, you know, 1 for English? This is our country. This is Spanish country. And then now we're sitting there, you know, champion a Eurocentric language. Our language here, you know, Hillbillyonics, I think is better, more precise of the dialect. So, you know, you come to our country, you speak Spanish. The language of Spain, when you come to our country, you speak English. The language of England, I don't know. We should work on, you know what I think actually would work? If we worked on a universal language. Let's work on a universal language. I think there's a guy who actually did that. Also like Haitian Creole. They were the spoken language, and then they wrote the words the way it sounded. So every word is spelt exactly the way it sounds, whereas English has all these weird-ass, you know, rules. But nonetheless, you know, Pichipera. I don't know.